Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Eric Cast, and I'm the community manager here at Established, the power behind Startup of the Year. For those of you who are new to our events, Established is a consultancy that works with a diverse range of organizations to help them develop innovative strategies, startup ecosystem engagement, and product event strategy and production. Our most known program is Startup of the Year, which is a community resource and awards program focused on supporting and elevating early stage founders. Today's panel session has been specifically curated to discuss something that all startups must face: hiring. Not just hiring, but how to make sure you're hiring the right people. And to get going, I would like to welcome and introduce our panelists, starting with Jen Consalvo, who is the co-founder and co-CEO of Established.
Hello, everyone. Nice to be here. Thank you, Eric. As Eric mentioned, I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of Established, which is a consultancy. We work with many organizations, big and small, on innovation, startup, and communication strategies. But we really cut our teeth before that by working with startups for many, many years, for over a decade, with a company called Techco Media. And prior to that, I actually worked in tech, building products. So I built products for millions of people at a company that many young people today probably won't even remember, but for many of us, it was the most exciting and biggest thing since sliced bread. It was called AOL. And through all these experiences, I've had decades of experience now working with team members, hiring, firing, all of that, good, bad, and ugly business. So very excited to be here today talking about this for all of our startup founders.
Thanks, Jen. Also with us today, we have Daryl Roy, the founder and CEO of 3D Media.
Sorry about that. Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Daryl. I'm the founder and CEO of 3D Media, as Eric just alluded to. We started in 2016. Prior to that, Army vet, and spent about 10 years in commercial nuclear ops. Just like Eric and Jen said, building your team is everything, right? No one can do anything alone, and building the team that executes the vision of your company or organization is one of the most critical keys to success. So I'm excited to be on this panel and excited to learn and hopefully contribute a little bit from my experience.
Great, thanks, Daryl. And also back with us again is Ubaldo Simonetti, the co-founder and CMO of InterviewIA.
Hi, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's great to be back with the community. InterviewIA really helps companies build their teams. That's essentially what we do. When we have a variety of ways that we can do that. We started out building a technology and interview platform to help scale and build structure into the interview process, right? To give companies an opportunity to, really set their interviewers up for success. I think that's where a lot of the problem with how we hire now, that the interviewers, untrained interviewers, that particular part of the process, you get a lot of bias, right? You get a lot of kind of fear, or more like hiring for likability instead of actual ability and alignment. And so with the technology now, we also recognize, the uncertainty in the market and the fact that a lot of companies are still hiring and they need to hire yesterday. And so how can we take the data and the technology and use that to basically come in and say, look, we're going to go find candidates for you, because that's the number one issue. We're going to find candidates and we're going to screen them for you, and we're going to give them to you. Or if you have candidates, but you just don't have the time to go through all of them in a really structured way, we can do that too. And so all along, using the technology and providing you with that technology to give you that transparency throughout the entire process. So right now it's how can InterviewIA help you hire and build your teams, especially those critical first roles as a startup.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you guys for taking the time today to join us. And I know everybody's busy, so all right, let's jump into it. First question for Ubaldo. When you're screening a potential candidate for a position within your organization or helping another organization, what are you initially looking for in that individual?
So it really depends on the role. So that, where we stress and a lot of the work that we do up front is to sit down with the hiring team and go, okay, what are the critical, like absolutely required things that the right person needs to have for this, right? And it's behaviors, it's skills, obviously, but it's also kind of things related to mindset and growth. And so we really define those out, because then that's what helps us determine what questions we're going to ask to make sure that we're evaluating the candidates correctly. So it's a hard question to ask because, well, I will say this for us, and I think that this should go for most companies. You have to have the passion, so as leaders, as founders, right? Like, we started this company for a reason. And so how do we find people who share that passion, right, for the mission of what we're trying to do? I think that's critical, especially at the startup stage. And I think that's where you run into a lot of problems because, oftentimes we hire friends or we hire directly from our network, but that doesn't necessarily mean that first sales director loves what we're doing, right? They're just good at sales and we know that, but I'm telling you, that passion piece, that's a critical piece. So I think that's probably the number one thing besides the things that we've defined. You have to have the same passion, especially at the startup stage. Otherwise it just doesn't work as well.
Okay. Jen, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100% agree with what Ubaldo said, because, we've done this a few times. It's one thing when you're at a big company, right? And you've got thousands of people who are all sort of in it for different reasons. When you're a small company, every person matters, and you sort of all have to be on the same page about your vision and mission and excited about what you can achieve, because the things, the stressors, the pressures that you're going to have are different. And we've talked a lot about this in the past, especially with our last company, Techco Media, where we were writing every day, right? Writing articles for startups and stuff and having a lot of live events. It was important that people understood that their why and why they were part of this organization, because that's critical to staying with it through all those times. And along with that, I would say really understanding your mission, your vision, and your core values. As a small organization, it can be hard to put the time into that, even if you're just like a couple people, or even just yourself. But I would argue the sooner you can do that and start to evolve that, it's going to be a changing story. But if you can continue to really hone in on what those things are and the core values, it's going to help you as you think about who do you need and what are you looking for as you bring people into the fold.
Daryl, any comments?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Jen and with Ubaldo. I think at the startup stage or any stage of any company, the mission, the vision is critical, right? But I think it's also important that not only do they align with your why, but they have a very strong why of their own, right? That drives them on a daily basis, right? Motivation is temporary. Motivation is something you get in front of people and you give a rah-rah speech and then it fades away, right? But drive and passion, those are the things that make that cause people to get up every day and ask themselves, what am I going to do today that makes tomorrow better? What am I going to do today that gets me closer to achieving that why? And if people are only, if the only why that they are pursuing is a why that motivates them, then it's exhausting as a leader to continually be motivating people, right? You can't do that. I mean, it's a very short-term type of solution. And as a founder building a startup or someone leading in a larger organization, the drive of your own team, takes a lot of that load off of you. And so then when they have their strong why that aligns with the why of the organization or the why of the leader, that's the perfect recipe right there, where you can drive toward that mission, toward that goal without constantly having to, emotionally caffeinate your team, right? So
Yeah,
I
that
want
can
to
be
add,
very exhausting.
Yes.
well, and I wanted to add something because something Jen said, something you both said kind of sparked, when you're defining that, your mission, your vision, your values, right? Don't be afraid to share that in the job description, right? Like throw that out there as part of your message, because you want to say, look, we're hiring people for this. And by the way, we don't want this. Don't be afraid to list those things, because, part of the problem with the way job descriptions are today, it's like you get so many people applying who shouldn't have applied in the first place. And as a startup founder, right, you don't have time to go through all that. So how do you set yourself up for success? And it's just truly like transparency and clarity, even at that stage of saying, look, this is what we want. This is what we don't want. If this is you, please apply. If not, don't waste our time collectively, right?
Yeah, that reminds me of a long time ago. I was looking at job descriptions and I saw one that said, "Are you at the top of your game? Are you the best at what you do? Don't apply. Keep moving." Because they were looking for a very specific type of someone to grow with the company and that they could rely on. And passion is important with anything we do in our daily lives. If we don't have passion for it, we're not going to give it our full effort. We're not going to really dive into it. So, which kind of actually brings me to my next question for Jen. Talking about passion and about the fit and the mission, vision, and the whys and how they all connect. Would you say that a person's overall personality has to be gauged to fit within your organization as to become a good, for a good employee?
I think that's a really interesting question. And just thinking back through my own experiences, there has to be some level of fit, right? Of some cultural fit. There's always going to be different personalities, and I think you want some variation in your team. If everyone's exactly the same, if everyone has all the same interests and hobbies, I think you're missing out. You're gonna have some gaps in your view. So I think variation is important and a lot of different points of view, but there's a certain level. You want your team to be able to click, or else you're going to have a lot of butting heads, and at a certain point that can become detrimental. You also want, and this is where I go back to core values. If you can be on the same page, and again, making that part of your hiring process, like one of our core values has always been with varying vocabulary, how we stated it, but you got to own your stuff. That's a really important one, right? And when you have people who just sort of, they maybe do their work, but they don't own it, right? They don't see it to completion. What does that do to other team members and their morale? How do those things follow through in the conversations that they have every day? So I know it's a little bit different than personality, but some of those things still, they have to mesh together to work as a team. Now, there's a little bit of a difference sometimes if you're not going into an office every day, but I would say the more you're virtual and just online, sometimes those things that are even harder. Different personality, people maybe are a little more forgiving in person when you see each other every day. I think sometimes when you're online and you're just on calls, things, if people are more abrasive, if you have some people who are really, hard hitting, they're snarky, they have certain sort of personality, and then you have some people who are completely different. Those things can sometimes really have a difficult time translating in that online only environment. So I'd love to hear other thoughts on that, though.
Yeah, Daryl?
Yeah, I was going to add, I think I agree that you're looking for kind of because each company has their own DNA, right? And so you have to define that. And the way I guess we kind of look at it is starting with more of like the behaviors that align with those personality traits. Like, how do people act in given situations? And you can define that, and you can find the right questions to ask to get that information out of candidates. So I think that's critical is, and it's also in the, up front, like look at your current team, kind of analyze and understand, like, what are the personalities we have and what are we missing? that we know could really be beneficial, and hone in on those things while also making sure that the candidate does align with the other behaviors and personality traits that you're looking for. But also, to Jen's point, like what are we looking for that we don't have? But I think it takes a little bit of an effort to really define that out, because otherwise we get stuck in, my definition of grit could be much more different than Daryl's or Jen's, right? So we've got to define it as a team. What does that mean for us? And I think that's a critical part. But you can do that, right? And you can measure that and evaluate that objectively in the interview process.
And just to add on that, I think size of company matters a lot here too. If you've got 3 or 4 people, bringing someone into the mix is going to do something to that group that's very different than when you have a group of 3 or 4 or 500 people, which is very different than over 1,000 people, right? So you have to sort of, and then you can start to look by department. And I'm sure many people here have experienced that, where there are literally departments within larger companies that have their own sort of personalities and group behaviors. But when you're speaking about a startup, that mix can be a little delicate, and you have to sort of think about that as you grow.
Yeah, personalities, whether you call it a personality or you call it the way people respond to either influences or hardships, those types of things, those traits, they're critical for a small team. For a larger team, as you said, you have the dilutive effect, right? We have so many different personalities and inputs that in theory, those inputs could make a smaller effect on those teams. But from our perspective, from a startup, every person, it matters, right? And when we talk about cultural fits, I think that's incredibly important. But equally important is, as you both alluded to, is the cultural add, right? That person who brings something to a culture that is in desperate need. For instance, your team is an incredibly positive team, right? It's necessary in a startup when you're continually facing challenges. You bring someone in who tends to be on the other side of that spectrum from positivity. Some people might call that negativity, but to me, a respectful dissenter is as critical to any team as someone with a positive attitude, someone who questions what everyone else is thinking, who looks at things from the other side. Well, what if the perfect scenario doesn't work out? So, but finding that person who does that with the right intentions is kind of the key. And that's where it all goes back to the why. Like, why are you questioning this just to be contrarian, or are you questioning this to find the proper outcome towards the actual goal of whatever product or service or whatever it is that your company provides to your end users? As long as that mission is always at the forefront for every individual, the personality of the individual becomes less of a concern to a degree, right? To a degree. But that's my input. And when it comes to these virtual meetings, where like our team is fully remote, and you're absolutely right, context gets lost a lot, especially when there are disagreements, right? You don't see how someone interacts with everyone. You only see how they interact with you or in this group. And so context is often lost. It's kind of like, text messages. There's no way to communicate context in text messages. Well, this is a little bit easier to communicate context. In the bigger picture, it does muddy the water a bit. So.
Yeah, I love when you were talking about looking for kind of that opposite personality. It's, again, because where we all default to, just because it's comfortable, right, is hiring people who are like us, because that makes us feel comfortable. And so what you end up having then is a very monotone kind of group of people who all have the same personality. Yeah, we love to go to happy hour together and drink beers and all that kind of stuff. But to your point, does that really help us? Yeah. Right. Does, you want that fresh discussion, that those counterpoints.
That's right.
But if you don't have a defined way of looking for that in candidates, we just all end up hiring like for like, because it's just, it's easier, right? It makes us feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And
And that's why diversity, like having a focus on diversity, whether it's something that happens naturally or something that you have to actively pursue, is so important.
Yeah.
Not just diversity of, all the different key things that everyone looks for, but diversity of thought, diversity of background and experience, education, all these different places. When we put, and I think one of the biggest challenges is, especially in job postings, is we put these restrictions on job postings, 4-year degree in computer sciences for a developer. And, like, what are you at? You're hiring the exact same person that you've hired 15 times over.
Yeah.
Bring someone in who has a different perspective, who has worked in a different way to get where they are, who has contributed to their communities and to the environments that they've worked in a way that is not the same as everyone else. I mean, is that the answer for every position? I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But the fact is that we so often, as companies and as leaders, we box ourselves into the specific person or type of person or educational background of who would fit this position and contribute to this project or these goals. And it is, I personally believe, and this is just my experience, but I personally believe that limits our ability to innovate. And when you're doing something, we all like to think that we've started our companies because of something that we're passionate about, that we think that we can make a big difference in, and that we can do it differently than anyone else who has ever done it before. But if we do that by doing the same things that everyone else has done before to create this company, you're risking falling into the exact same place. Because most companies that are start with the idea that I'm going to do things differently to solve this pressing problem.
Yeah.
And
But if you're going to do that, go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, I'd just like to introduce to the stage Michelle Andrade, who's part of the Established team. Our discussion leader, Eric, just lost his internet.
Oh, no.
So Michelle has graciously jumped in, and she's going to help us lead the conversation.
Well, hi, Michelle.
Welcome, Michelle.
Hey everyone, I'm enjoying the conversation. I definitely agree about the diversity. If everyone on the team has from the same background, how do we grow? How do we reach the next level? So I definitely agree with that. And
Can I add to that real quick? I love that discussion too. And I think the issue, right? A lot of those things get defined by the founders early on, right? Like, we're only going to go recruit from this school, and we're only going to recruit for this degree. So it's so important at this point as a startup founder to take your approach, Daryl, which is to say, look, those magic numbers, do they really matter? Do you need 8+ years of experience? How much of that can we actually teach? Because to your point, we have an innovative new way of doing things. Like, if you have these things over here, if you have these transferable skills, can we teach the other stuff? And then you're more likely to have a very loyal employee who aligns with the mission more than anything.
That's right.
That can learn that other stuff.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll say the person who comes to an interview and says, I applied for this, I don't meet all the criteria, right? I'm not asking for you to give me the job. What I'm asking for is for you to give me a shot, right? That person is like, you got me. I'm in your corner. Let's do this, right? Because all of us, most founders, I mean, every day we're on the verge of failure, and every day we just need a shot, right? We just need a shot. Just give me an opportunity. And that's huge. Now, don't get me wrong. You need people who have experience and, who do these things, but there's just something romantic about that person who says, just give me a shot. And then they go out and they do it. Right. And I personally love those stories.
yeah, definitely. And we can all think of that person who gave us an opportunity as well, and how important that was for us. So that'll lead us into our next question. So I'm curious, what if the candidate you're considering is a great fit for your company and would work well with your team, but they don't meet all the job requirements and they have a strong enough background? Would you still consider them for the position?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
A couple things come to mind for me. So I mentioned when I first came on that I worked at AOL. That was like my first. I worked for a smaller startup tech company, and that led to working at AOL. And during their early days, but they were scaling really quick. And a lot of the people who they hired didn't have degrees. they, Northern Virginia was not the tech center of the world, right? Like they were, although there's a lot of people who came out of government work, right? Tech work in different ways. They brought in a lot of people from hospitality. Like you would be surprised by the people that they brought in. And then they had this amazing training program. Even for me, when I joined, they put me through like this 3-week course of learning to code that, I'd only done a little bit of coding in the past. I really didn't know much about it. And I learned to code. And my first job there was as a developer, and they just taught me. And through my 14-year career there, they were so open to me jumping around saying, hey, I've never done that work, but I think I'd really like to be a product manager. Can I try that? Okay, over there's some, I don't even know what that role is, but I like it. Can I try that? And I was able to move around, and many people did that, move into different roles without the credentials. And that's how we all grew. And we just all had so much loyalty to that company because of the opportunities that they gave us. And learning on the job, it's just it's such a great way to grow and get to know your teammates and feel connected to everything. So I'm a big proponent. It depends again on your needs. We've hired a lot in the past as we've grown our companies. We've hired what we've called, pardon the phrase, but we've called them stem cells. Right? Like people who, jack of all trades, whatever you want to call them. It's not that they're not hired for a specific role. It's not that they don't have a specific area of focus, but people who are just flexible. They know that if I have to, if we're doing a live event and I've got to go take the trash out, I'm going to do it. Or if I'm going to join this meeting and maybe help with an important sales pitch or whatever it might be. People who just are willing to learn and just do different things. I really look for that in candidates.
And Jen, I would argue that as a startup, most of your team should be those people, right? Where the SMEs are the folks who train and mentor the rest of your team, right? But I would argue that, we'll just go with the 80-20 rule because it's an easy one to go with, but I would argue that 80% of your team has got to be those type of people who are fast learners, passionate about the mission, capable of switching responsibilities on the fly based on what the need is at the time. Because ultimately, as a startup, you're going to pivot a number of different things a bunch of times before you really find where your fit is. And to do that, you can't just have a founder who is flexible. You can't just have a leadership team who is flexible, because truthfully, your founder and leadership team, we don't really do much, right? And the reality is we don't build the products. We do a lot, but we're not the heart and soul of any company. We might be the face or, the strategy in leading those companies. But when things need to get done, when things have to happen, when fast pivots have to happen, you've got to do it. The whole team's got to be on board, and you've got to have that momentum, right? You've got to get that for the flywheel to get moving. You've got to have critical mass going in the right direction. And if the only flexible people are your founding team, again, it all goes back to the energy that is necessary to do anything, right? You're going to be expending a ton of energy trying to pivot if you don't have or a large portion of your folks with those characteristics.
Yeah.
So you're dead on. And I'll also add, I've never met a person who worked for AOL who had anything negative to say about working for AOL. Like I don't know that much about the internal workings, but apparently there's a lot of really heartfelt memories and connections that were made there by folks. So there's something to say for that. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I would say that started with the founders and leadership and early days. And later on, what's interesting, I think we can all learn from this, was there was a period of time, I can't remember who the leadership was at the time, but it was not Steve Case, where all of a sudden they were growing. I think we had already merged with Time Warner, and they asked everyone to fill out a census type form for the highest level of education. And they made a big deal about sort of changing management over to only those with MBAs, and they started hiring a lot of Ivy Leaguers. I'll tell you that strategy lasted less than a year. And within that year, almost everyone that they had moved into the leadership positions were gone. And that was very interesting. They did a lot of experiments, being in a company for a long time like that went through so much growth and so many pivots. Seeing those types of experiments was very educational for me and very informative, because that definitely left, a lot of people with some weird, different feelings. And I think it's something we could learn from. Not that there's anything bad with an Ivy League education or an advanced degree, but it's another thing to sort of try to structure a company around that.
Definitely. And we do have about 30 minutes left, so let's get into a couple more questions. Let's talk about the interview process. So let's start with you, Daryl. When conducting an interview with a candidate, what is your question strategy and what kind of responses are you looking for?
So we do have some interview guidelines that we go by. But I don't really follow those. I should. I really should. That's not. I don't mean that to say that's a good thing. I should. But the thing is, like when I'm a part of an interview, one of the things that I try to first off, I want the person to be comfortable. If it's an in-person interview, I'm not going to sit behind a desk, in a position of quote power. No, I want the person to be comfortable because I want genuine answers. I want as much as I can to see who that person is. Right. If this is the type of person that I can trust our company with, right. Because ultimately I know people say this is a negative thing, right. We do feel to some degree and professionally, in a professional sense, that we have built a very close company. I don't want to say it's a family, but because people tend to hate saying that, but we've built a very close company. We care about each other. We try to take care of each other. And if I wouldn't allow a person into my home, right? If I wouldn't trust them with my family, I'm not going to trust them with my company, right? Because these are the people who are working with people I care about, whose livelihoods, these folks, all of our livelihoods can very, very much depend on that person. So being genuine is kind of a key thing. And if I'm in an interview, if I'm a part of an interview, one of the things I try to make sure that we do is communicate why we're here, why we have grown, like what is it about us from our perspective that we think sets us apart. And it's not about the products that we build, right? Smart people can build great products. Like there are smart people all over the world, capable companies all over the world. That's not why a company survives. A company survives because of what they do and how they do it, right? On a daily basis, the habits, the small little habits that they do every day, not product related, but people related, whether it's your clients, your customers, people that are on your team, or just the community that you're a part of. Those are the things that set a company apart. They're the reason why companies make it, why companies are looked at as a great company to work for, to be a part of, or to work with. It's the way that they treat each other, the way that they treat the people that they provide services to, and the way that they treat their community. From the beginning, I tell the person that, listen, we're a company, we have to make money, right? You're a person who is interviewing for a job, you've got to make money. But from our perspective, the things that we do, to a large degree, they're not about us, right? They're about the people that they affect, right? And on an individual level, I don't try to convince people that this is the right way, but to give them my perspective is the way that we treat other people, the way that we interact with other people, the things that we do as a company. We can't be selfish about those things, right? We've got to recognize that they affect everything that we do affects somebody else. And that goes into all the things we do. So, just the answers that I want are genuine answers. Like I don't want cookie cutter answers. There's a time in an interview for like the situational questions and the cookie cutter. I Googled what questions to ask in an interview, and these are the questions that I ask in an interview type of thing. Sure. There's always a place for that because it wouldn't be popular if there wasn't value in them. But from my perspective, what I value in a team member could potentially be a little bit different than what a project manager values in a particular open position, the specifics, because, we're in different positions and we need different things.
Definitely. Thank you for that reply. And Ubaldo, how about you? Tell me more about your question strategy and kind of responses you're looking for from candidates.
Yeah, so this is what we do, and it's so for us, we're very focused on structure, and I get where you're coming from, Daryl. I get the only caution I throw out is, that there are a lot of people who, I guess what I'm trying to say is again, we all have to be on the same page about what we're looking for, and like the indicators that align to success in a role. Because there have been so many times where I've seen sales managers tell me, oh, well, I know at the handshake, before we even have the interview, if somebody's handshake's a bad handshake, I'm not going to hire them. Like, okay, well, did you do that 1,000 times and then, prove that out? Because no, like you're just doing it based on one thing, right? And it's funny, we always tell the story about Thomas Edison. He essentially sort of created the interview as we know it a little over 100 years ago. And he was hiring for a lab assistant, and the lab assistant would come in, right? The candidates would come in. Before anything was said, he would hand them a bowl of soup. And if a candidate seasoned the soup without tasting it first, he immediately dismissed them from the process. He was making an assumption that they were going to be innovation killers in his lab. But we still hire like that today. One thing that tips us off. And so that's my only caution is, because a lot of times we do want to get comfortable with the candidate and we have chit chat before the interview and that sort of thing. The problem is some of that chit chat from the candidate gets input into our decision-making algorithm here in our brains, and then our biases take over. And it's like, oh, well, that person went to the rival school. I don't want anything to do with that. Right. Like, so I guess it's structure and objectivity and really defining what you're looking for. And the other thing that's cool there then to create a really great candidate experience is we'll share our questions ahead of time, 3 or 4 days ahead of time, because again, we've already defined what we're looking for. We need to hear these things. So a candidate can get super prepared, feel really confident. Their answers aren't wrong. They're just not necessarily right for us in some instances, and that's okay. But they had a chance to bring their A game, and we know what the conversation is going to be about. And so how we look at interviewing is to say, let's say you have 9 critical requirements that we're looking for a candidate. We'll spend an interview exploring 2 to 3 of those. So that's about a 3 to 4 interview process where we're focusing 8 to 11 questions on 2 to 3 things to get us there. And that's how we sort of break up our process. And then that helps us determine what questions we're going to ask and who's going to be the interviewer, because that's also super important too, in determining who's going to be a part of the hiring process. So that's kind of more of how we approach the process and how we look at the questions and things like that. But you do want to leave room for what Daryl's talking about, because there is some of that, kind of feeling in there, right? That you're looking for, that there's that alignment that, sometimes it's hard to get from asking questions, but can you scale that, right? There are great interviewers out there, but they're individuals, and you can't scale that across an organization of 500, 1,000 people. And so how do you do that? How do you create a structure that mimics that, but that gives other people an opportunity to be a great interviewer? I want to be a brand ambassador. I want people to walk away from my interview going, that was a great interview, and I would tell all my friends to go interview at this company. But I think what happens more often is that interviewers seem like gatekeepers, and that's where you get, you get candidates going out into the talent marketplace going, don't interview with this company. It was terrible. So sorry, that was kind of a long-winded answer there, but that's sort of the process, how we approach it.
And I would like to respond to that, Ubaldo. Like that's phenomenal. Great feedback. And to be clear, like I'm never the only interviewer, and it's usually not the core interview, but in terms of, my interaction very specifically with individuals. It's around that. But that's phenomenal feedback and great explanation of why those things are important. So thank you for that. Man, I love these panels. You get to learn.
No, my pleasure. I know, right? We
so
all
much,
learning
right?
from each other. It's so great.
Thanks, Mac. All right.
All right, that was really great. Thanks for that insight. If we start wrapping up on or start coming up on time, I'd like to ask, move on to another question here and kind of start wrapping towards the end of the session. And it kind of goes towards what I've heard in the past just from speaking with other founders. Founders have mentioned in the past to me as I talk to them, like how can they find the best talent? Those who come from, the big logos, like, the Googles or the Apples, those who come from Harvard and all those big name schools. And they're like, we have to hire these people. And my question is always, why? What are your thoughts on chasing those types of candidates?
And I literally just mentioned a story about that earlier, so I don't really have to mention much there. I'll just say we have hired people, I feel like over the years at all levels, and I'm always surprised. Pedigree does not necessarily translate into what it is you need. And so I will encourage everyone out there to sort of put that aside and look at the individual in front of you and try to determine, does this person have what they need to succeed? Or is this person set up for success at this company? Not necessarily, do I think they're going to be better because of what's, what might impress me about their resume. So it can be hard for some of us to put that aside. Some of us have very strong feelings, right? Depending on our own backgrounds about what we see on the paper, on the resume. But in my experience, it's everyone is so individual and unique. And I've seen people come from, again, no degrees, who are phenomenal and quick learners and street smart or whatever it is, but they are awesome, to people all the way up who are awesome as well. And then the flip, people who have had, Harvard MBAs and Yale undergrads, and but maybe they don't have the scrappiness that we're looking for at this particular phase of what we're doing. So it really, for me, comes down to the individual and their experiences and what they can bring to the team.
I always look at it as, would the best data architect at Twitter actually be the best data architect at Google? And I would argue no, because it's two different companies, two different missions, right? Two different passions. Just because somebody is a great data architect at Twitter, they're probably giving their 100% because they love it there. It doesn't mean they're going to love it at Google. So then they're going to give you 50%. So you can't define the best. It's exactly what Jen's talking about. And also, if you think about it, I mean, it's a small candidate pool of people, that you're looking at when you're looking at Ivy League or whatever, those sorts of degrees and things like that. When, if you think about it, there's so many more people who, from underrepresented communities, especially, who never get an opportunity to even go to college, but they're a hell of a data architect. So why wouldn't you open up your opportunity, your chance to find those candidates, as opposed to just narrow focused in on one university because, oh, that's where the founder went? Because that's often how it happens, right? So yeah, the whole best definition, it's always been, and then there was, oh, we're in a war for talent, right? No, you're just not looking in different places. You're not taking the effort or making the effort to go look for the people who are right for your company. Again, because it's like a match game, right? It's like eHarmony. It's like every company has a different DNA, and there is a data architect that's right for your company. But you just have to take the effort to go find that person, and not just, oh, we need to have the best, because the best doesn't exist.
And then everything, I agree with everything you said, both of you said. I'll just add, while let's just be careful not to, to say that because someone has an Ivy League degree that they may not have the characteristics of a startup. And I think you both alluded to that, right? And I'm not saying either of you said that, right? Because a word that you used earlier, Ubaldo, that I really love is grit, right? We can't assume that every person who goes to a military university or an Ivy League university or finishes with an MBA or a PhD is a person who doesn't have those characteristics or, got those things easily, because many didn't, right? And so, again, like you said, there is no that perfect candidate could come from anywhere, and they could look like anyone, and they could have the personality of anything, right? It's really hard to determine that. The point is that don't box yourself into a specific ideology, a specific area, a specific group to achieve or to find the candidate for your team that fits the bill. So yeah, and I think I just kind of repeated what both of you said, just in a different way. So
That's exactly it. Clarify, like, don't box yourself in. Don't, the more open-minded you can be about the person in front of you. A lot of times, because when I find myself not looking for that or asking for that, sometimes I'm surprised, like, oh, I didn't even realize that you did this or you did that, right? Like, it's just, you've got to just look at the people in front of you.
Well, I think, we all have intersecting identities, and it's not just the fact that, like, I'm half Argentinian and half white, essentially. It's more than that, right? Like, I have a marketing background, but also talent acquisition. And that's an interesting combination if you're talking about communicating your brand as a company in creative ways to attract the right candidates. So it's looking like exactly what you're saying, Jen. And Daryl, it's like, blow open the box, right? And connect the dots about someone's intersecting identities. Because you're right, there may be a business sense to hire somebody from Harvard because you want access to that network. That makes sense. Define that, right? And that makes sense. And so, but what other intersecting identities does this person have that when they come together are super powerful?
And we do have a question, and let's see if I pronounce your name correctly, or actually I'll have you introduce yourself.
My name is Tainara. So I'm originally from Brazil. I came to US actually doing my master's in and actually transacting very humbly, trying to learn about business intelligence. My husband, he's a former Fidelity, he's in crypto, he's learning about blockchain, he's super excited. So I'm just humbly trying to learn as well. I have a question, and it's just a question of, I did come here actually from an MBA in Babson, and then I heard great stories about Harvard and MIT. So I did actually got those certifications through but yeah, so that's like a point for me to learn, because humbly, when I looked at those institutions, I respected them very much, and they had the course that I was looking for my area, which I've been in finance for about 10 years. But I've heard friends, like very good friends of mine, that have said, like, take those certifications out of your resume, because that is going to scare the people that you're looking for opportunities if you're coming to blockchain. Because if someone doesn't have a Harvard or an MIT, they might not consider you because you have a certification that might scare or intimidate. So if you guys could just shine a light on me, because I'm just humbly trying to learn. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say, first off, congratulations. You should be proud of achieving both of those things. And I hope that our conversation didn't make you feel like you shouldn't be proud of those, because you absolutely should. Personally, I don't believe that you should hide those things. If, in my opinion, if someone is intimidated by that degree, that's not a you problem, right? That is not a you problem. You've done great things. You've worked very hard to achieve the things you've achieved, and you should be proud of them. Unfortunately, egos, in some cases, overtake better judgment, right? And I don't think that anyone should be ashamed or hide the fact that they've achieved something great. So don't hide those things. And if I think you'll find someone who values those certifications in addition to your personality, your grit, your experiences, and everything else that you've achieved. I think the biggest challenge is that the perception is that many times folks lean on those as the accomplishment that entitles folks to positions or opportunities. That's not the case. In a person, and a humble person on the other side should recognize the work that it took for you to achieve those things, to achieve those certifications, but balance that with the need of the company and your capability in other areas. This is, those certifications, this, right? So I'm preaching to the choir. Those certifications are something that you accomplish, not who you are, right? Just like your career is something that you do, it's not the person that you are. Your habits and your habits and your accomplishments and all the different things that contribute in your experiences make you who you are. But I would say don't hide those. Be proud of those. You worked hard to get those. You deserve to say that you've done that. And don't let other people's ego or potentially insecurity, diminish your accomplishments.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there are many ways to tailor your resume and your approach. And so think about, what you want to put out there, whether it's in a cover letter, in an interview, even in the way you structure your resume, what you're looking for. All those things matter. To me, it's similar to the person who maybe they've achieved some of the highest levels in terms of climbing the ladder at some impressive companies, but maybe now they want a complete change in what they're doing, and they want to be in the startup world, and they want to be doing something completely different. So I pay a lot of attention to what is their experience, but what are they seeking? What is the experience? What are the opportunities that they're seeking? Because that matters a lot too.
Thank you so much. I'm very grateful. I learned a lot today. I took this webinar because I just really wanted to learn more of companies and startups. And what fascinates me as a Latina woman coming to this country is an opportunity to have a seat on the table. So in finance, there's a traditional, and it's very well established, but being in blockchain or going into a startup, actually right now, you see that everybody's humble and it's looking to all learn as a group and having a seat on the table. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
But to add to that, the thing that you look at, or I personally look at, is what's your whole story, right? And that's a part of your story. And why would you want this company to be a part of the next chapter, right? So as you go into interviews, thinking about those types of things, this is a story. This is my story, right? It's a compelling story. I've worked my way up, moved to a new country, accomplished all these great things, but I'm just getting started. And I want the next chapter to be with XYZ company because I believe in the mission, I believe in the vision, and I believe that I can contribute to that. And I want that to be the next chapter or part of the next chapter.
Awesome. Thank you for your question. And we only have a few minutes left, so I have one more kind of fun question, which for all of you, which is give us one good hiring story or bad hiring story that you have. And we can kick it out. Jen, you have one?
Oh my gosh. There's so many because I happen to think I have the best team ever. But okay, so years ago, this is actually before Established, when we were Techco Media, we were doing events. We were doing tons of events, and we were doing a big one, or probably about 6 or 7 events at South by Southwest one year, and we needed additional help. And so our person who was leading up events put an ad in Craigslist and asked and put people through a lot. With her, I was impressed because she was relatively new herself. She hadn't really hired people in the past, but she asked candidates a few questions like, how would you approach if I asked you to do this type of event, what would you do? And people actually had to submit, some written responses. And one woman who responded, we actually loved her responses. So she came in and she helped with what we were doing, and was just like, she was awesome. And this was just a part-time, hey, we need to help for a few days, and a little bit of time leading up to it. And afterwards, she just stayed in touch and was like, I love your company. I want to work with you. Tell me what you need. And we stayed in touch for months because we weren't hiring immediately. And we actually missed each other a couple times. Like when I was interested, she had already taken another job, but we stayed in touch, and eventually stars aligned and she joined our team, and she's still with us today, like 2 companies later. And she's amazing. She's actually on this call, Jessica. But I just loved how we had and we did this with a lot of different people on our team, where we had maybe hired them part-time for something or in a different capacity, and over time just grew the relationship. There are others on this call too as well who we worked with in that capacity. So I don't know, I just feel like that sort of organic building that relationship sometimes is just an incredible way to build the foundation of the company.
Awesome. Thank you, Jen. And Ubaldo, let's hear yours.
So mine is from a client, really, more than anything. And it's related to employee referral programs. And so we did this big analysis for a company in their sales department. And they had a really generous employee referral plan, right? Like, you referred somebody in, I think you got paid like $5,000 if they were there for 90 days or more, right? Well, the analysis that we conducted actually showed, and the company is very proud of this program, and they hired a ton through it. The problem was that the majority of the employees who were referring other employees were all low performers. So they were looking to supplement their income because they were not really good salespeople. And the problem was that they were referring equally low performing candidates into the company. So in reality, the company was losing out on a ton of money because of an employee referral program that they thought was helping them attract better talent, but it was doing the exact opposite. So that's like the one hiring story that sticks in my head of, how we think we're doing something good, and we think we've got a good thing going, but if we just dig in a little bit to understand what's really going on, it's actually hurting us. So that was just one big snafu all the way around.
All right. And Daryl.
Well, I don't have that many negatives. I think I think there have been maybe 2 people throughout our company who have joined our team and then subsequently left. One of them left to start his own company, which is exactly how can you ask for anything better? And then the other person, it just didn't work out, and their passion was somewhere else, and that's where they went and worked. But they're all on very good terms. But I'll say that we had one person who's still on our team, and he's a critical member of our team. He came from a different industry. We're a software company. He came from construction, the oil and gas and construction field as a PM, and we needed a project manager, and he was just such a perfect fit. The only challenge was that his timeline, because the large company he worked for laid off like 19,000 people globally, and he was one of them. Yeah, it was massive. Well, we weren't quite at a point where we could hire him, so not as a full-time team member. So I told him, I was like, look, he wanted to work. He wanted to be a part of our team. We wanted him on our team. I said, listen, we've got this project going on. It'll be a part-time type of thing. At this timeline, you'll be able to come on when this next contract lands, and we'll go. And he, I made an offer to him that was the top of what we could do. And there was a little bit of negotiation. And I told him, I was like, look, I'm going to tell you like this. We can't go up on our salary offer. I said, but I can make this commitment to you that at this point, this is 100% of what we can offer. I'm giving you 100% day one, 100% day one. And I'm going to continue to give you 100% from this point forward. the only thing I need is the same back from you, 100% moving forward. And from that day all the way till now, like, he's been one of the most critical. Every team member is critical, but he is also, specifically has been one of the most critical team members on our entire team. And ultimately my goal is every team member we have on our team, if we ever become a 50,000 person company, they're still a part of our team. Statistically, probably won't work out like that, but I'll do everything I can to make that the truth. We'll see. Over.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing your stories. And thank you for joining us today. Eric's still having a little bit of internet trouble today. So, but we appreciate you all joining. We also appreciate everyone who attended. And thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all for